Hey everybody, it's Ashley of Day-to-Day Social Work. I'm a private online tutor and I specialize with assisting people to pass the license exam in social work on the master's and bachelor's level. You can find me online at Day-to-Day Social Work on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. So I wanted to come and jump right into the material on this video. This is the third video of the night, so I'm trying to churn them out for y'all because I haven't been active as much as I should have been over the last few months, but we're in a pandemic, so I'm taking it a day at a time. So today I just felt like jumping into a lot of videos to try to get some of this stuff out. So this video will be about a few different things. I'm going to try to get all of this information into one video, but we're going to talk about how to recognize when someone is in a crisis, and we're going to talk about home visits and safety. So I've had a lot of crisis situations occur in my career, and so I'm going to give you some examples that are from just different things in my career. I'm going to change up some information just because of confidentiality. I'm not going to say who people are, of course, or where these incidents happen or when they happened, and some details will be changed up just for example's sake. So one thing that I've really recognized is that you have to be very observant of the people that you work with, especially when you work with people for a very long time. So I've worked with families for 2-year periods at a time at one job. I've worked with families for 3 or more years at another job. Every time that I've had any position in social work, I've always worked with families for a duration of time that was beyond the normal one time, let me give you this resource, and then you go on about your life. It's always been a long-term thing, whether it was for a year or 4 years or 2 years or whatever. So you learn people and you learn their patterns and you learn their behaviors and you know what their baseline is. I don't want to say normal because what really is normal? Like how do we define what's normal? So we look at what is baseline for each person, what's typical of a person. And so I think it's very important that we are observant of our clients, especially if we work with them for a long time, because when you notice things about people and how they are, how they behave and how they interact, you know when they are outside of their baseline and what's not normal for them or typical for them. And so when trying to recognize when a person is in crisis, you have to use some of your 5 senses. And I think that that's very important because that's how we observe things. We observe things through tasting, smelling, touching, hearing, seeing things, that kind of thing. So we're going to use some of our 5 senses when observing clients in order to recognize when they are experiencing a crisis. So the first thing is, of course, looking at someone. So, of course, you can tell a lot by looking at someone. Sometimes you can't, though, because like I've said in previous videos, we all are sometimes guilty of putting on a smile when everything is crashing down in our lives because we don't want to talk about it, or we've learned that, if someone asks you how you're doing, you just say, oh, I'm fine. How are you? It's just like a cliche kind of thing where that's the normal answer. So normally when someone asks how you are, you just say, I'm fine. How are you? But you don't really stop and really think to actually tell someone how you're really doing. So you have to be able to kind of tell when you look at your client or just anybody in general, if they are just saying that they're okay and they're actually not. So one example that I can give is I had a client who, when you looked at this person, they were very blank. They had a very flat affect. They did not smile. And when they did smile, it was kind of like a nervous smirk. And they were always fidgety. They always looked down. They always talked in a very low voice if they talked at all. Their posture was very slumped over and slumped forward. And so you could just look at this person and tell that they had something going on. What ended up happening was the person had very, very severe depression. And all of these things, if you don't know to look for something like that, then you would just think that maybe this is a quiet person or they're shy or whatever. But this was this person's baseline. Every time I saw the person, they would be slouched over, little eye contacts, fidgety, just nervous, just you could just tell that something was going on. But like I said, that was that person's baseline, and so by baseline I mean that's how this person was every time I saw them. So there was a time when the person was a little bit more fidgety, a little bit more nervous, just kind of uneasy when you looked at this person. And so it turns out through some assessment, asking questions, and you can't be afraid to dig and ask questions in these situations. You have to be able to be comfortable with asking uncomfortable questions. So through some assessing and asking questions, I learned that the patient had some ideas that were not um, ideal. And I can't say certain things on YouTube or else video gets flagged. But um, the patient was not having good thoughts about themselves. And so at that point, I knew that this was a crisis situation based on the person's answers and also based on certain parts of their body that were marked up. And again, I'm using terms loosely, so hopefully you get my drift, because again, certain things can't be said on YouTube. But just observing their arms and legs and stuff. If they're not that I would be personally examining a person, but if they had on short sleeves or shorts or anything where their skin was exposed and you see something that's abnormal on their skin, they could be skin picking, they could be scratching, um, cutting, that kind of thing. And so there are things that would cause you to be able to dig a little bit deeper. I wish I could just be direct, but with YouTube, there are all these boundaries. But anyway, hopefully you understand what I'm getting at. And so, at that point, questions have to be asked about how they're feeling about themselves and if they want to do anything to themselves and that kind of thing. And depending on their answer, of course, you have to immediately get them help. And so that's a crisis situation. So even though this person's baseline was already at a demeanor where they were clearly depressed, now they were kind of over the edge in that one meeting. And so something had to be done. Another situation was I had been working with a family for about 2 years and the family member came, pulled up to work one day, and this person comes outside and they say, "Miss Ashley, I can't do this anymore." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "I took the kids and dropped them off. I can't do this." And so this person's baseline was always well kept, hair done all the time, very clean person. Children were always well taken care of, dressed very well. But by observing throughout the interactions that I had with this family over several weeks, I started noticing that the children had on like Timberland boots and toboggans and jackets, like puffer jackets, and it's June or July. And the parent hair was matted when normally the hair is always done. The echolalia, where you're talking to the person and they kind of repeat what you're saying to themselves, and you can watch their mouths moving and they're saying what you're saying. And so when this person was waiting for me outside of the place where I was working at the time, I was like, "Oh shoot, something is not right," because all of these things I was observing by looking at the family over several weeks, um, they just did not add up. And so this person was actually crying out for help. And so I took the person to get help. And it's just amazing what the brain does, and how the brain reacts to certain situations, because it was a very scary thing that happened. It was a scary moment. I've had a lot of um, experiences where clients had mental breakdowns, and it taught me a lot, and it prepared me for whatever came next after those experiences. So it's not good that people go through these things, but it's good for us to see things happen outside of the book and be able to recognize them in real life, to be able to get people the help that they need. And so this person ends up going into a hospital and getting help, and they did bounce back and went through treatments and things like that, and things were better. So that's another example. So like I said, just looking at a person and observing their baseline and seeing when they kind of go off of their baseline. Another thing, I had a client, and this is a minor one, but client's very pleasant most of the time. But then one day the client was, again, the echolalia, like you can see them, their mouth moving, and you can see them kind of repeating what you say as you talk. And it's we learn about it in the books, but again, when you see it in real life, it's just a different thing. And so the client is doing like this over their head, and I don't know what that actually meant. And I discussed it with my clinical supervisor, and it could be a sign of psychosis or maybe hallucinations. And we know the difference between delusions and hallucinations. Delusions are things that could actually be true, but they probably aren't. Stuff that we believe, but it's not actually true. And then hallucinations deal with your five senses. You hear things, you see things, you taste things, you smell things, you feel things crawling on your arms, that kind of thing. And so it could have possibly been that this particular client was experiencing some psychosis. So looking at body movements, looking at appearance, and seeing what's going off of the baseline. Another one, I'll save that one for when we talk about safety. So these are the things. Then also just listening to someone. So when we talk about our five senses, we look and we see things, we hear things. So we have to know how to actively listen to our clients and hear what they're saying without saying it. So if a client and it's all about the intonation of the voice, and how they say things. And sometimes people are calling out for help, but they don't really want to say that they need help. And I was in a training about a month or two ago for youth mental health, and I forget the guy's name, but they showed us this video of this guy who is an advocate for people with mental illness, who he was having some problems, some challenges with his mental health. And he, I think, lived in California, and he was going to this famous bridge. And I don't want to say what for, but just follow me here and use context clues. But he said that he was on a bus, and he just wanted somebody to ask him if he was okay. And so there were all these people on the bus, and nobody asked him if he was okay. I think he said the bus driver said something to him, but didn't really, a lot of people are just going about their daily lives, and they aren't thinking that somebody is going through a challenge, especially if they don't really look like they are. And so, I wish I remembered what his name was so that I could show you. You could look up videos and stuff like that about him. But if I find it, I'll put it in the description box. But and if you know who I'm talking about, then put it in the comment section below. But so he gets off the bus, and he says that this lady asked him to take her picture, and she didn't notice that something was going on with him. And so he went on to do what he came to do, and he survived, though. And so now he's this advocate, and the story was just amazing. But paying close attention to people, listening to people, and we won't get it every time. I'm not expecting or telling you that every time you will know when something is wrong with someone, or that something is actually wrong with someone when they just are being their regular baseline selves and nothing is actually wrong. So I'm just saying to just kind of be aware of people's baseline and know what's not typical for them. Um, but yeah, listening. If your client comes in and they're normally bubbly and stuff, and maybe they just look tired from work and they're just like, oh, I just can't handle all this stuff anymore. And then you're like, well, what stuff? And they say, just working these 3 jobs and having 4 kids and that kind of thing. And, the typical person would be like, oh, well, I probably wouldn't be able to handle that either. But, you kind of want to dig into that, especially if you have that rapport with the client and you can tell that this is overwhelming. I mean, it sounds overwhelming. And that's just something I just came up off the top of my head with 3 jobs, 4 kids. I mean, it's a lot. It sounds like a lot, and I'm pretty sure it is a lot. So just listen to your clients and know when to dig for more. Again, if somebody sounds tired or they look tired, and that's not how they normally are, and I mean, they really look and sound like something is going on, don't be afraid to just ask. But you have to be prepared for what's next. You have to be prepared if they're not okay. What are you going to do? Do you have a plan? And you always, always, always have to be comfortable with directly asking them that question about, do they feel like they're going to harm themselves and that kind of thing. Some words I can't skip over because I got to say it in order for you to know what I'm talking about, even though we're on YouTube. But, you have to ask those direct questions because we have to, we're trained to do that as professionals, as clinicians and social workers. Then also, when we think about like smell, I know you don't want to go around smelling people and stuff like that, but if you have a client who's normally, like I said, well put together, and they have a noticeable smell, like they haven't been practicing good hygiene, and they're also, some people, maybe they've been jogging or running or exercising or whatever, but if this is like a constant thing for someone who's normally well put together, and you just notice that maybe they have on different clothes, but they don't smell right, like they haven't taken a bath in a few days or something like that, and this is not normal for them, and it's not normal for whatever the situation may be, then you probably want to kind of look out for that as well. Also, like I said, the excoriation, the skin, which is the skin picking, the trichotillomania, the hair pulling, or just any of those repetitive actions that someone starts doing out of the norm. And I think typically it's because of anxiety, maybe, that some people do stuff like that, or it could be a number of other reasons, but we have to be aware of those things. So make sure that you look at people and observe what their baseline is, and like I said, recognize when they're not at that baseline. Then I recently went and got I got a service done recently, and I was in this place of business, and a business person that I normally connect with at this place. And I'm being very, like I said, I'm covering all of my bases. I don't want to, this was not professionally related at all, but I was just out in the community doing errands and stuff like that, and came across this person that I normally do business with, and this person had a complete breakdown, right in front of me, and they started crying and they ran off into the bath. And notice I'm using they and them and their as opposed to he or she. That's another way that you can kind of cover up when you're trying to explain something without disclosing a lot of information about a person or a situation, or a person rather. So like I said, they were I'm also saying the family or the parents. I'm not disclosing genders or names and that kind of stuff. But anyway, so they ran off into the bathroom and they started crying. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? So I immediately kick into social worker mode. And they come back out and they apologized for crying and said that they didn't want to do that while they were in their place of business. And I'm like, no, it's fine. You're a person. Things happen to people, that kind of thing. So once I said that it was okay, they start crying again. So what happened was there was conversation inside the place of business where these other people were talking about depression, and this person heard them talking about depression, and that triggered the person. So like I said, they went and they cried in the bathroom. They came out and apologized. I said it was okay. They immediately cry again. So I took them to the back, and because I have a rapport with this person because we do business all the time, and they broke down, and I let them, and I asked them all of the questions because this was something that was not typical for this person. Within my dealings and interaction with them, it was not typical. I had not seen this person be this way with breaking down like this. And so we had a conversation, and the person disclosed a lot of personal stuff to me. And I kind of had like a mini session with them. I won't say a therapy session because, of course, I'm not a therapist yet. But, just as an associate of a person that I normally do business with. And we had a conversation, and, I actually gave that person some resources, and made sure that they were going to be okay, because it was a very serious thing that happened with them, and they decided to disclose this information to me. So, I mean, like I said, you have to be prepared that if they're going to tell you what's going on, what are you going to do about it? So you have to make sure that you know the resources, and you know what to do if a person is in crisis. And if all else fails, call 911 and get somebody in there who can help, depending on what the situation is. So that's that. But when we talk about safety, and that's with recognizing the crisis and stuff like that. So make sure that you are aware of, the kind of responsibility that's been bestowed upon us as therapists, well, not therapists, sorry, as social workers. And then also know what the laws are in your state, because there are different laws in different states to where, yes, you're a social worker when you're on the clock. Sometimes when you're not on the clock and things happen and you are aware of it, and you're not on the clock, you're not responsible for certain stuff that you have knowledge of. But know the laws in your state, because you don't want to be off the clock and become privy to information, and then you were there and you didn't do anything to help. I mean, please know the laws in your state and your responsibilities as a mandated reporter. So then, okay, that's that as far as recognizing when someone's in a crisis. I mean, if somebody is just their behavior is different, if they are talking fast, they're tangential, if they're switching from subject to subject, and they're, manic and that kind of thing, recognize all of those signs and know what to do to get help. So then moving on to safety. So in this field of social work, we know that we're going to come across situations where we may not necessarily be the safest, whether that's going on home visits, or if you are providing case management or therapy in your office, or if you are just anywhere, a prison, a school, wherever, anything can go down anywhere at any time. So you always want to make sure that you try to be as safe as possible, especially within this pandemic. Hopefully, if you're making home visits, your agency is providing you with PPE and personal protective equipment, and giving you training on how to keep yourself safe within the pandemic and with home visits and that kind of thing. So let me see. What do I want to tell you all about? Of course, if you're going into somebody's home, a lot of our clients don't want us in their house. For me, with home visits, I've done them. I've done case management in the home. I've done housekeeping inspections. I've done home visits just as part of my job. I've done a lot of stuff in people's homes. I've had people jump out of the closet on me. I've had a coworker try to debate me on how she had a worse experience going into the homes than I did, and I didn't know what her point was on that. I mean, home visits, especially this day and age, they're not safe. So if you have to go on a home visit, of course, go in pairs, or one or more people need to go with you. Of course, they always say to back into the spot where you're going in case you need to hurry up and leave. You don't have to back up. You're already facing outward. You can just drive and go. Know where the entrances are and the exits are of wherever you're going, whether it's a gated community or an apartment complex or cul-de-sac or just wherever you are. Also, when you are in your office, the way that your furniture is positioned is important as well. You don't want to have your back to the door in your office. If you're able to move your office furniture around, you have a small office, you don't want your back to the door. You kind of want to have your desk, if possible, beside the door. You don't want to be behind the door because somebody can bust in there and track you in there. I mean, you got to think about the positioning of office furniture. You have to think about an escape route. And, I think normally on a day-to-day basis, we don't have to deal with or worry about escaping from our clients, depending on the setting that you work in. But, you just never know what can happen. So being close to the door, know the policies of your agency. If you are able to have a pepper spray or a mace or something like that, if you're able to have a weapon, a concealed weapon, or, some kind of something to protect yourself on home visits, in your car, or whatever the situation may be, know what your agency's policies are. Know what your agency's policy is on de-escalation as well. I've had a situation where a patient was very upset, and I had to de-escalate the situation, and nobody came to help me, and I really felt the way about that. And so, I was advised to find out what the de-escalation policy is and that kind of thing. So just make sure that your safety is a priority over everything, especially when you are going in home visits or if you are expected to de-escalate a situation. And most of the time you don't even know that you're going to have to de-escalate a situation because they just happen. And take all the trainings you can. I mean, de-escalation training, mental health training, all of the training. Take it all. Take all the training you can, the personal development, the professional development, the CEUs, even if it's not related to your job that you're currently in. If it's social work related, within reason, like take all the CEUs you can, take all the extra trainings that you can, because you want to be well-rounded as a social worker. It makes you more marketable. And when you are put in certain situations, at least you know or kind of know or have an idea what to do in those situations. So let's see. I think I may have told y'all before about the time I went on a home visit and the client asked me to come to the back, and I was like, oh no, why does he want me to come to the back? And but he was just trying to show me a collection of fire trucks that he had collected over his career. So I mean, like, when you go into the people's homes, even if you don't feel the safest, which that's why I don't want to go anywhere where I don't feel safe. But sometimes you have to go into people's homes. I don't think it should be a requirement unless you know that that's what you're doing when you sign up for the job. But, some places like Child Protective Services, they're required to go into homes. But other places, you don't really know that that's what you're going to do until you get into it. But, darn, I forgot what I was going to say. But, just make sure that you know where you are. You need to send the address of where you're going, to your colleagues, to your supervisor, to your mate, your spouse. If you don't feel safe, you don't ever want to show your fear though. If you don't feel safe around someone as much as possible, I think it's good to try to remain calm and not show fear, because you may be fearful, which is a valid feeling, but there's no reason to be fearful. And so it might cause your client to feel a certain way, like you're judging them, or you might be fearful and you have valid reason to be fearful, and people prey on that kind of thing. So they see that you're afraid and they're going to try to take advantage if they know that they can. So it's kind of almost like you have to have a poker face sometimes. And these are just from my experiences. Some people have never done a home visit. They don't like them. They won't do them, whatever. Some people might not ever have to do a home visit as a social worker. Some people work on a macro level, and that's not part of any job they'll ever have to do. But I'm just giving you from my experience, which is all I have to go off of. So, just be prepared for anything. And I'm not trying to scare you by saying that, because, anything can happen anywhere at any job, whether you're a social worker or not. So I just think that, we need to just be aware of our surroundings and be hypervigilant and not afraid. Just be aware and alert and go and do what you do. You are a social worker. You are there to help somebody help themselves and better their lives. So that's all I'll say for this video. And I hope that, like I said, if all else fails in any crisis situation or home visit or whatever, call 911. Or if you feel like you are going to be afraid when you go on a home visit, you can always call and get a law enforcement officer, a public safety officer to come and escort you. Or you can just call and ask that they send someone to kind of sit on the street somewhere, just so that if you really feel afraid. Now, there are certain instances where, okay, if it's that serious where you got to have law enforcement, you probably don't need to be going to that house. Or you probably don't need to be in a profession that requires you to go into people's homes, because if that's something that causes you that much fear, you probably don't need to be doing it. But there are instances where, depending on the location in the city, and if you're by yourself, or if you and a coworker are going somewhere and both of you feel helpless or defensive or whatever, then yeah, you don't want to call law enforcement every time you go on a home visit. But if you know that a community is known for being drug riddled and violence and gang related and that kind of thing, then yeah, I would say to have somebody on standby. But and even then, nothing may happen. So just be aware, be smart, be safe. And like I said, give me your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope that this video is helpful for you. And if you have any questions, let me know. Please like the video if you thought this was helpful. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, share with your colleagues, share with your friends, and check out the rest of the videos on the channel. And until next time, I will see you later.